to be a part of that equal and opposite force for Black women. Because the truth is not something that most of us want to hear. And so when we talk about the concept of a new daughter, before we can even really get to dealing with ourselves as Black women, unfortunately, we got to deal with this Black male, because this is something I've learned personally. When I first started writing, when I first held my platform, those women who followed me will tell you, almost all of my posts were directed directly at Black women. And if I did speak about Black men, it was only in relationship to Black women, right? Which I do the same now, but my focus was not on really breaking down the Black male, breaking down his role in things. It was more so, listen, sisters, we need self-accountability. I would call Black women out on our poor choices and there's ways in which we're thinking, which puts us in collusion with the conspiracy against ourselves. That was my main focus. But I have found over the years, ladies, that for the most part, only those women who are already kind of in the know could understand what I was doing. New women or women who were not familiar with my message found it very difficult, because it's facing the truth, the harsh truth. It came across as, oh, you're victim blaming us. Oh, you're just like Black men. Oh, you're this, you're classist, you're sexist, you're classist, you're elitist, you're judgmental. I found that Black women had a very difficult time, particularly when I talked about the concept of motherhood. And there actually was a discussion about motherhood that led to the creation of the Black Women Think Tank, when I found that Black women were unwilling to face the truth about our role and our negative relationship with motherhood and the erroneous beliefs that we have, and didn't want to have to talk about the concept of regulating your womb, of being discerning in your mate choices, of being discerning in when and where and if you have children ever. That there was this notion of, fairy tale going on, despite all of the horrific numbers, despite the condition of our families and our communities, despite the condition of our children, and the overall dysfunctional nature of the average citizen within the Black community. I was still arguing with Black women about the truth of having to regulate certain aspects of ourselves, particularly when it came to reproduction and sexual choices. And I can't begin to tell you, ladies, the types of pushback that I had. And so at some point over the years, I realized that there was some background work that needed to be laid before I could get Black women to really start willingly looking at themselves. I was going to have to detach them from this. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's a spiritual attachment. It's an emotional attachment. It's definitely a psychological attachment. It's a sexual attachment. It is just a fixation, like obsession with the Black male. And idealizing whatever good parts of him exist, and I don't know, stewing in the juices of whatever negative parts of him exist, but just detaching. I could not reach Black women and get them to look at themselves before I had to give them permission to do that by pulling them, like prying their hands off of the Black male. And so this is when I started to focus more on the Black male, and in essence having to prove to the Black woman, listen, y'all don't really know what's going on. You really don't know who he is. You're really in denial. You're really in delusions about him. And then I had to start proving that, because of course just to say that is not enough. So this is where the receipts started to come into play. And so,
where have we heard this before? Using the destruction of the Black male image to get Black women, or women, period, to listen. Now, this is coming from an ardent, hardcore, anti-Black male feminist. She's straight up admitting that basically she's using the destruction of the Black male image to get women to reflect upon themselves, just like a whole bunch of other dating coaches have done. Now, in that 3-minute clip, she just went through and told you everything that Black men have been saying for a long time. And she's admitting that even coming out of a woman's mouth, Black women refuse to hear it. So the only way she can get through to Black women is blame everything on the Black man. And then after she finishes destroying him, then there's nothing left for the woman to hold on to. Then she can get the woman to look at herself. But I really can't blame them. They're just following the same script that America has used for the last 400 years. Destroying the Black bodies and the Black image of the Black males to build their platform, build their culture, and build their wealth. So for the past 50 years or more, I think it's even been more, women have been doing that to Black men. and by proxy to their sons. So is it no wonder why this contagion, this cultural pathology keeps continuing decade after decade, generation after generation? It's gotten to the point things are so toxic that we can't even stand to look at each other anymore. Now, when I first heard this clip, I couldn't believe that this was coming out of Breuklyn Bleu's mouth. I really couldn't. She's the last person I thought that I would hear say something like this, which shocks me. Now, do you hear her in the clip talking about how addicted to black men black women actually are? And her talking about using the language that she uses to pry black women's hands off the black men. And what do we get constantly accused of? We get constantly accused of doing something to them. We constantly get accused of forcing black women to stay in relationships with us when it's not true. But it's a sad state of affairs that the only way that you can actually get through to a group or to women, black women especially, is by demonizing her sons, her husbands, her father, and the men in her life, and then blaming them for something that they didn't do. But let's continue.
Really having to delve into the archives and pull out some shit and say, listen here, this is what's really transpired. This is when my message started to kind of focus a little bit more on black males, but not because I prefer it to be that way. Because I recognize that black women are under such a heavy spell of both patriarchy, which is male domination in general within the larger system of the world and the white structure that we live in, but also the pimparchy, which is the black male, the black community's attempt at patriarchy, which does not really give any payoffs for black women for a number of reasons. And so I realized it's like I had to cut through this fixation, like literally break the spell before I could even begin to get black women to turn and look at themselves. And so talking about black males and talking about our sons and talking about dispelling some of those myths became the focus of some of my work. I would probably say about 60% of my work. But be clear, that's not really my purpose. My purpose is to get us to look at self and to accept the truth. And I have found that black women don't want to accept the truth about black men because ultimately black women don't want to accept the truth about themselves, about black women. And the denial and the delusions that I thought was really a spell of just complete codependence, dependence, fixation, obsession with the black male, it's not really what it is, ladies. It really is us not wanting to deal with ourselves, the black woman, not wanting to look at ourselves. Yeah, we'll look at other sisters and point and blame, but we don't want to look at ourselves. And so I knew that in order to get us to even begin to embrace the concept of self-analyzation, some introspection, some kind of going within and facing some harsh truth about ourselves, I was going to have to remove the distraction, which is the black male. And that's what some of my work has been dedicated to for probably the last couple of months, probably since the beginning of the year.
You can't get any more plainer than that. That's something that black men on the internet, black men period, have been saying for years. Black men have been saying what the fuck for 80, 90, 100 years about black women. And you hear it out of the mouth of a black woman, a radical black woman, that the real problem is not black men or the dependency upon black men. The real problem is the black women not able or unwilling to face the truth about themselves. It's very easy to dump your bad choices on black men. It's very easy to dump your bad decisions on black men. Generation after generation, black women have been dumping their failure in life and their choices on black men. My grandfather left my grandmother, and she didn't have a father. And my mother didn't have a father. And since my father left my mother, I didn't have a father. So I grow up and I do the same thing that my mother did and my grandmother did. And then at the end of the day, I blame all the men in my life, or the men that weren't in my life, and the man that I drove out of my life, which is the father of my child, whom I picked, allowed into my womb, and had a child by. All of my own free will, but to absolve myself of the blame, I'm going to blame him. Which Breuklyn Bleu is saying that. She's saying that to get women to look at themselves, she has to destroy their excuse. And black men are the excuse. So what you're doing is not destroying something outside of yourself. You're destroying a group of human beings and their reputations just to get black women to look at themselves. Demonization is very old. This is how they got men to go into battle to kill other men, by making them less than human. You call them krauts, you call them Japs, you call them dogs, you call them sand niggas, they call them gooks, call them spics, whatever you need to do so that you can dehumanize these people for you to go out and do something inhuman to them. It's the same thing that white men have done to black men for years to keep them down. In slavery, you made them 3/5 of a human. You made them chattel or cattle. You call them niggers. You call them porch monkeys. You call them shines. You call them spooks. You call them a whole bunch of other things to demonize them and do inhuman things to them. It's the same thing when black women for years have made an excuse about why they failed. They dehumanize the black men in their lives by calling them baby daddies or no good niggas, deadbeats. When you don't like your mating choices, you call them lames, you call them simps, you call them nerds, you call them fuckboys. Then when you want them and they won't do what you want to do, they won't couple with you, you call them faggots, you call them arrogant, you call them stuck up, you call them whitewashed, anything but a human being. And now when the black community has reached its bottom in its pathology and you want to leave and you want to couple with men of other races, you just can't go over and do that. What do you have to do? You have to dehumanize the black man even more. You got to let everybody know that it's all the black man's fault because he couldn't provide in this racist environment. He couldn't do what the white man did. He couldn't build like the white man, even though he had the white man's foot on his neck for 400 years, just like the white man had his foot on your neck for 400 years. Well, for some odd reason, you feel that you have to step over and step on the black man to get where you want to get. And then you get mad when black men get tired of being your footstool. Because if you didn't, then you'd have to take blame for the wayward boys that were raised by single mothers that you basically raised, and you put out the product out there on the street to raise havoc in the community. And you get mad at black men when we call you out on your bullshit. All black men ever asked you to do was take personal responsibility for the shit that you've done. No more, no less. The same thing Breuklyn Bleu is asking you to do is something black men have been asking black women to do for the past 60 years. And the fact is that you're not shaming black men to do better. You're shaming black men to hide your own complicity in the fuckery that we call the black community. And you think by burying us in this blame that you're going to basically bury the black community, when the truth is the black community is you. The black community is almost 60% women. The black community is 70% single mothers. The black community has an 80% divorce rate perpetuated by women. The inner city ghetto is comprised of 40% poor women and the 10% or 15% of baby daddies that actually are seeding these women. That's the black community that you want to escape. And you want to go off someplace else and leave this black community behind, when in fact you're just going to replicate the black community wherever you go. You can see it in Los Angeles when they broke up the ghetto. Yes, they broke up the ghetto. All the inner city housing projects that have been around for 50, 60 years, they broke them up and they moved them out someplace else. They left what we call the black community. Guess what happened? That same element moved further out into the suburbs, mixed in, and what did they create? You guessed it, the same thing that they tried to run from, the same thing they tried to leave behind, they brought it right along with them. So you're saying that the black community is burning and it's done? It's bullshit. Because all black women are going to do is recreate the same problem that they tried to leave behind. Why is that? Because they won't fix the problem before they seed a new area. And all Breuklyn Bleu and Nicole Little and Crystal and Karazin are doing is the exact same thing that the black women and the black feminists did back in the 60s and the 70s. Now look at the problem, sweep it under the rug, and basically blame the black men for it. And what's going to happen? You're going to lose another generation. All because black women are unwilling to face the truth, and other black women and their simps are unwilling to tell them the truth. But just like any addict, and black women are addicts, or alcoholic, or whatever, they have a moment of clarity before they dive back into their addiction. And I want to say hats off to Breuklyn Bleu for having a moment of clarity and sharing that moment of clarity online. Hopefully it'll make black women grow and go into another direction and have some self-reflection. But for black men out here, this is a moment of confirmation. This is a moment where we say, we knew we weren't crazy. And we want to say, we knew this all along. So this clip, although small, is vindication for the black male YouTube struggle. So maybe now the brothers can kind of put this to bed and we can go about our own journey of fixing our lives. Now that not only do we know the truth, but our opponents have actually admitted the truth. And it's exactly what we thought. In the words of the late football coach Dennis Green, and I quote, "They are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. That's all for now. This is BGS, out."